I'm here with Una Mc Gurk, an independent European candidate for the European elections for Ireland South. Una Mc Gurk, you are so welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roisin.
Una Mc Gurk, you have been very vocal for a long time on many, many issues. But can we start off with the referendum?
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
how the Irish political establishment and the opposition got it all wrong.
Indeed, they did. Wasn't that a wonderful result, Roisin? And it was so unexpected by the political establishment. As I said in Newtown Kennedy last week, they quivered because, with all the resources they have at their disposal, each minister has about 5 advisors, and then with their PR team and their spin doctors and their media people. And then, of course, they have mainstream media on their side. And they still couldn't get it right. But basically, the Irish people saw through what they were doing, which was absolutely wonderful. Now, there was significant pushback, obviously, from people like myself. Michael McDowell got on board, and there were many others who just said, no, enough is enough. And so people came out, and I know the turnout was small, but as you know, the vote was over 70% against what the government were proposing in this referendum. And I just think that gave great courage to people, because I think the people who voted individually didn't realize that there were so many other people who shared their views. And I just think it was wonderful. And I think that helped to prepare and pave the way for what we're witnessing now with regard to the independents like me and so many others who are moving forward for the European elections. And I really sincerely hope that all those wonderful people and all those digital warriors like you and others who know what's going on, who no longer have faith and trust in our government and the political establishment, will come out on June the 7th, which is actually only 2 days away, and do the exact same thing. Make them quiver, put them back in their box. They need that badly. So I'm praying for that. I'm sure you're praying for that. And I'm sure, and I hope all your listeners are praying for that as well. But they're the ones to make it happen. It's about getting out, and it's about exercising your vote. You have to actually go out and do the voting.
Una, you mentioned Newtown Kennedy.
Yeah.
The Immigration Pact, the European Immigration Pact and immigration. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been a very vocal opponent of this pact, and in particular one of the measures, Roisin, which is the migration management measure. There were 5 legislative measures that were voted on by the EU, and they were voted on, interestingly, separately at the EU level, but it seems that in Ireland now they have to be voted on as a group together. You can't vote on them individually. But I'm very much against it, because ultimately what that will mean is that we will lose control over the numbers of relocated asylum seekers that we will have coming to Ireland, because it will mean that unelected bureaucrats will make that decision. So if a country like Italy or some other country is under migratory pressure, they can apply to the EU, to the Commission, and a non-elected bureaucrat or group of bureaucrats will effectively decide, well, Ireland, you have to take so many now, and other countries will have to take so many. And it's based on our GDP, and our GDP is artificially high because of the all the multinationals. So we may end up taking more than really we should be taking. And if we don't take the quota that's assigned to us, we will have to pay 30,000 per asylum seeker per year ad infinitum going on into the future. And if we don't comply with the law, if it's passed, and hopefully it won't be, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, infringement proceedings can be taken against us at the European Court. So what's unique about Ireland as well as Denmark is that we have an opt-out in relation to issues and laws in relation to asylum and migration, which means that when laws are passed in Europe in the area of asylum and migration, we're not automatically bound by them in the way that other member states are. We actually have to go through a process whereby we vote in to the Pact in the Dáil. It's an Oireachtas decision. And we have that option by virtue of Protocol 21, which is attached to the Lisbon Treaty. So that's a great benefit that we have, where we have a choice. And so at this moment in time, we're not bound by any of the terms of the EU Migration, Asylum or Migration Pact, which means we have at this moment in time retained some of our sovereignty in that area, which is hugely important, because if we vote into that pact, we will in effect be giving over more of our sovereignty, ceding our sovereignty to Europe. And this is not a good thing. I have a concern about this. There is this creeping incremental ceding of sovereignty that's happening every time we vote for a treaty. And I think a lot of people didn't really realize this, and now they're not really happy, because it just means that the EU is calling all the shots all the time, and we're having less and less power as a nation. And this is not a good thing. So at the moment we have that option not to vote in, but of course our government want to vote in this asylum pact, and for the moment it's stalled. It hasn't actually happened yet. So I don't know. It's not looking good. I have to say, it's really not looking good. But in the meantime, and just to make a long story short for your listeners, because lots of things have been happening, but the situation has really got worse, because we have a crisis situation now with 560 coming in every week into Ireland, and we really cannot sustain this. And IPAS centres are being set up all over Ireland, mainly in either working class communities or rural communities, and against the will of the people, where the minister responsible, Roderick O'Gorman, is not complying with the law um, in carrying out risk assessments to determine issues like, public order and public interest. And the people on the ground are not being consulted. So this is not a good thing, and it's causing a lot of anger, and it's causing a lot of fear, and this cannot continue. So what I have suggested is really a 5-point plan to endeavour to resolve this situation and really get a handle on it in a way that this government is not doing, because they're not applying the law in so many areas. The Minister for Justice is not applying the Immigration Act when it comes to people arriving without ID or passport. And this is really not good, because 85% of those are arriving without passport or ID. And we need to really work harder at applying the procedures under the Dublin 3 regulations to send those who have arrived in another country before they come to Ireland to go back to that other country. We need not to pass the EU asylum or opt into the EU Asylum and Migration Pact. We need to strictly enforce deportation orders, and also what I've recommended, and this is my 5th point, is that we need to join up with Denmark and all the other EU member states who are now calling on the EU to have an externalized processing system for asylum seekers, so that they can be safely processed in a third country. And that would alleviate huge pressure on Ireland. Because, as you know, with Rwanda, that has already acted as a deterrent, so much so that a lot of the people who would have normally gone to the UK are now coming to Ireland. So we have lost out as a consequence of that. So we really need to take action now. So we've got to the stage where we're moving beyond what might have been agreed at a European level with regard to the EU Asylum and Migration Pact. And bear in mind that this was going on for 8 years. This was being discussed and prepared for 8 years. And all it was doing really was just moving the problem around, managing it, not dealing with the core causes or the effects of migration. So I would hope that that would happen. And interestingly enough, when I gave that speech at Newtown and Kennedy, there was a Garda helicopter overhead, and it was very hard. I think people still could hear me, hopefully, but I had a microphone. But the next day, Simon Harris said that he was open to consideration about an externalized processing system for asylum seekers. So that's interesting. So we'll watch this space. But then I also heard recently that Mary Lou McDonald has come out and said, the leader of Sinn Féin has come out and said that no, she doesn't support such a system. So I don't know where this is going to go, but it needs to be tackled, and it needs to be taken head on in a different way, rather than this lackadaisical manner where the world and his wife can come here and destroy their passports and flush them down the toilets of aeroplanes, and then just take advantage of our system and our generosity. And I think it's not good enough. Of course, I very much support genuine asylum seekers, and I'm sure there are genuine people who are trying to come here. But the problem is that there's so much abuse now of the system that those genuine people may get lost in the system. And that's just what happens when you have an abuse of it, and when you have agents who are orchestrating the inflow of immigration both into Europe and into Ireland. And that's actually what's happening on the ground.
And when you have this immigration policy, which isn't even a policy, it's free for all, is very open for human and child trafficking coming into Ireland.
Indeed, because in many ways that's what it is, because the people who are managing it are agents. Like, it's well known, and the agents control the process and they get paid. And the question is, who's paying them and how are they being paid? And just because somebody uses an agent doesn't mean that they're not a genuine asylum seeker. And I need to make that clear. But then you have to ask, where did they get the money? How did they raise the money? If their circumstances are dire, but it may be that they got it from a relative or somehow they managed to get the money. But once you use an agent like that, the agent calls the shots, and the agent tells them what to do and how to do it. And what's happening is that in many instances, the agents are giving them false passports, which they're using to get here. And then the agent takes the passports off them when they get here. So they either flush them down the toilet or they give the passports back to the agent. And the agent uses those same passports for the next crop that he or she is bringing in. It's a business.
It's an industry, and a multi-billion industry.
A multi-billion-dollar industry. You're absolutely right, Roisin. And people need to call it out for what it is. And this government is just like, there's a word I was going to use, and I won't use it, but it might be considered to be rude. But this government are just adopting an inappropriate, laissez-faire attitude, which could have detrimental consequences for this country. I mean, they were already warned in 2022 in a leaked cabinet memo, even with regard to the inflow of Ukrainians, that this was going to cause damage, that the inflow of thousands of asylum seekers would adversely affect social cohesion. But the situation has only got worse since then. It's got considerably worse. And now you're having the designation of IPAS centres all over the country against the will of the people. Where is this going to end? I mean, somebody somewhere has to bite the bullet and say, listen, this has to stop. So I've done the best I could with my 5-point plan. It would be great if someone else would take up the cudgels. I've had some interesting comments on that plan, and others have suggested that the airlines should be made more responsible, and that cabin crew should do an inventory of people before the flight lands to make sure that everybody who lands has in fact got a passport with them, and that they should be told at the outset that in the event that anyone is intending to destroy their passport, that they won't be allowed off the plane unless they have a passport, because many of these people don't know the rules and they may not even speak the language. So I'm not blaming the asylum seekers per se. It's the people who are organising this as a business and who are orchestrating it. And there's so much room for abuse, but it's not being tackled by this government at any level, which is a source of great concern to me.
Not just the government, but also the opposition parties. They're not opposition parties, and
Indeed.
haven't been for a long time.
Indeed.
And that is what the public are fed up with.
Yeah.
And also the fact that many politicians, in fact, a majority of politicians, have forgotten that they are supposed to represent the people of Ireland and not tell the people of Ireland what to do.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. We're supposed to live in a representative democracy. We don't. The disconnect between the government and the people is vast and wide, and it's growing daily. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me. I mean, all these laws that have been passed, all these agendas and policies that are coming in from Europe and other places, and they're being imposed on the people without their consent. I mean, none of these issues are coming up at grassroots level. They're not arising organically. They're not coming from the people. They're being imposed at an EU level. And what will happen is that people will eventually begin to resent the EU, understandably, because they'll see it as some kind of a supranational behemoth that's imposing its will on the Irish people. So if the EU project is to be saved, it needs to pull back and row back from that situation. And I think One of the ways in which we can do that is if you have representatives like me, MEPs like me, who are there on the coal face and who report back to the people and tell them what's happening. And, ask the people, look, how do you want me to vote on this issue? What's your view? Let's do a poll on this. And so then the people can feel that they're involved in the process, which right now they're not, because what's happening is that laws are being passed, they're being voted on by the MEPs, and then they come and suddenly people find out about it after the event when it's too late.
Well, Una Mc Gurk, thank you so much
You're very welcome.
for taking the time to come to Candidare and Kilkenny and to speak, especially take the time out of your busy day canvassing to the Irish Political Roundup.
It's my pleasure. And for those listening, don't forget, I know probably every other candidate has said this to you as well, but don't forget to give your number 1 to Una Mc Gurk next Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. Una Mc Gurk, independent European candidate for Ireland South.